Mm.
Hello, welcome everyone to today's event, a conversation about feminist anti-racist activisms, intersections of feminist and anti-racist activism in the Middle East and North Africa. My name is Nadje Al-Ali and I'm the director of the Center for Middle East Studies here at Brown University, where I'm also professor of anthropology and Middle East studies. Today's event speaks to the two initiatives that I started here at the center, one focusing on gender and sexuality as an angle of analysis to understand wider developments with respect to the Middle East and North Africa. But also another second initiative revolves around racialization and racism in the context of the Middle East and North Africa, as well as its diasporas. Now, within the context of Middle East studies, and also activism in relation to the Middle East, we are engaging now in long overdue discussions around Blackness, constructions of Blackness, racialization and racism, as well as anti-racist struggles. In recent years, feminist activism, especially that of younger activists in the region, is much more intersectional, and feminists have paid increasing attention to issues around ethnicity, race, and racism. And today's seminar aims to explore precisely the intersections of feminist and anti-Black racism in the Middle East and North Africa. And I'm very happy to welcome today and be in conversation with Maie Panaga, Menna Agha, Nabila Moussaoui, and Khawla Ksiki, four prominent feminist activists and researchers who are engaged in anti-Black racism campaigns and politics. We will be exploring questions of racism within the Middle East and North Africa, and the way in which feminist movements have historically often been complicit in maintaining and reproducing racism, but also explore changes in terms of feminist consciousness and activism. So let me introduce my guests to you. First, Maie Panaga Babka. Maie is a Sudanese activist based in Cairo. Maie co-runs the editorial section at the Cairo-based Ikhtiyar Feminist Collective. In 2014, Maie co-established Ikhtiyar, which is devoted to feminist knowledge production in Arabic, covering areas of feminism, sexuality, reproductive health and rights, feminist internet, and women's street performances. Maie is also on the advisory board of COAL. We are on this together, and so it's really nice to invite Maie in this contact. This is the advisory board of COAL, a journal of body and gender research. Welcome, Maie. I'm also really delighted to welcome Menna Agha. Menna is an architect and researcher, a 2019-2020 Spatial Justice Fellow. She was visiting assistant professor at the University of Oregon. Currently, Menna is coordinating a spatial justice agenda at the Flemish Architecture Institute. Menna holds a PhD from the University of Antwerp and an MA from Köln International School of Design. Menna is a third-generation displaced Egyptian Nubian And this informs her research interests in race, gender, space, and territory. Among her publications are Nubia Still Exists, The Utility of the Nostalgic Space, The Non-Work of the Unimportant, The Shadow Economy of Nubian Women in Displacement Villages. Menna, very nice to have you with us today. I'm also introducing to you Nabila Moussaoui. Nabila holds a PhD in anthropology and works on migration issues south of the Mediterranean. Her thesis is entitled Underground Activities at the Algerian-Moroccan Borders. In this thesis, she explores the reality of illegal migration known as Harga, which affects the Algerian and Moroccan youth, as well as the border trade known as Trabendo that exists between the two countries and which extends to Southern Europe. Nabila has a second thesis in progress at the University of Jean Jaurès in Toulouse, France, in which she investigates competency in migration. She is currently a lecturer authorized to direct research at the University of Oran II in Algeria. Welcome, Nabila. And then it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Khawla Ksiki. Khawla is a Tunisian jurist, advocate for environmental justice, and activist who is engaged in feminist, anti-racist, intersectional activism. After the Tunisian Revolution in 2011, she joined NEMTI, My Dream, an association that fights against all forms of discrimination, especially racial, and promotes unity, peace, and justice. She is a human rights activist and member of a radical feminist movement called Falgatna, We Are Fed Up, which defends women's rights and lobbies against sexual violence in Tunisia. In January 2020, she co-founded the collective Voices of Black Tunisian Women, which offers them a safe space for self-expression. It's the first initiative that addresses issues affecting Black women, gives voice to their experiences, and promotes research about their social conditions. Thank you all for joining us. So we are going to be in conversation for about an hour, and then we'll have time, hopefully, for a discussion. So at any point, I encourage you to put in your questions or comment in the Q&A function if you're joining us via the webinar. If you're joining us via YouTube, you can also put your question in the YouTube function and we'll be able to see those. So two of the speakers, Nabila and Khawla, will be talking in French, and there will be simultaneous interpretation into English. So you can use the English channel in the interpretation function, which is on the bottom of the webinar. If you are following us and you need translation from English into French, that is also available from in the French channel. Okay, so we seem to have some technical difficulties. Nabila had problems connecting with her sound, so we might have to talk to her via phone. But at this point, I will start asking the first question. And I'll start with you, Maie, if that is okay. So, but this is a question that I'd like to ask all of you. So I'm interested to know more about the way that the specific intersections of feminism and anti-Black racism play out in the context that you're active in. So are feminists in the country, in the locality, in the city that you're working in, are they more broadly aware of racism and engaged in fighting racism? Or is this generally a blind spot amongst feminists? And also on the other side, I'm interested, is there a wider anti-racist movement? And is that intersectional, or is it more gender blind and not conscious of gender-based inequalities? So Maie, would you like to kick us off?
Absolutely. I just thank you, Nadia, and thank you everyone for inviting me. I want to make sure that my voice is clear because technology. You're able to hear me, right? Perfect. This is an extremely important and loaded question. I don't know where to start, but within the recent years, our movement, and I'm talking about the feminist movement, it's growing more intersectional in its analysis and its approach to many issues, gender, sexuality, race, class. So it is safe to say that, yes, among the feminist movement, there is a growing awareness regarding race as such, on top of many other topics. And however, this awareness, maybe it have some blind spots. One of those blind spots is understanding our context. What is the feminist movement in our context? And our feminist movement is extremely diverse, and it comes with different and sometimes intersecting, sometimes clashing political agenda, from the far right to the far left and everything in between. And the approach of class and understanding class depend on which group or which individuals are we talking about, which make it very hard to generalize the feminist movement as one unity in our context, and even in one country as Egypt. And if we move broader to the context of MENA, for example, our regional context. So we're talking, I'm gonna try to address the groups that I was part of. There is definitely an intersectional approach and understanding of the role of class, race, racialization in many issues that faces women, bodies, and queer, and everyone. However, there is a huge gap between understanding, theorizing, and practice. When we look at the feminist movement, when we look around the room, it's extremely hard to find voices of Black women taking the center of this conversation. And we're still minority within the feminist movement. And sometimes it's mentioned with all the good intention. However, the conversation is still at service level. It's directed at looking at the structural injustice faced by Black women, Nubian women, migrant. However, it never tackled the complicity of the feminist movement within some of the situations that we're facing, and the reason that there's no Black people no Black women, no Black queers in the room. Regarding the anti-racist movement, there is, of course, a lot of effort to create such a movement, and a lot of effort, whether it's individual or in certain group, especially when we talk about the Nubian struggle. But however, it's not gendered. And then this is where we look back at the intersection. So if you're talking about race, suddenly the aspect of gender, class, sexuality, it's dropped, and we're talking about race as if it's happening in this bubble. And when we're invited to the feminist room, then it is gendered, but it's not taking in consideration a lot of other. So there's a huge gap between theorizing and between the desire to bring race to the room, and between who is actually talking about it, what efforts are being done, and the kind of organizing that is happening around race in intersection with other issues.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I mean, I can imagine that in the Egyptian context, there would also be differences. I'm just going to ask Menna now to answer the question as well in terms of Sudanese and Nubian. So in addition to racism linked to, anti-Black racism, I guess there are also issues around specific relationships between, let's say, Egypt and Sudan versus Egypt and, the Nubians are also Egyptian, but the ethnic differences. So I assume that is complicated. Would you like to just add a little bit on that in terms of?
It is, and because as Nubians, we are kind of stuck in this nation-state project between Egypt and Sudan. Half of us became Egyptians, and the other half became Sudanese by a stroke of a line made by a drunk Englishman, I assume, and then became a country of Egypt and a country of Sudan through the line that was drawn in 1899. But then the politics of race become very different, because the caste system that the colonizer has put in place, that has made the lighter skin more privileged, had flipped it for Nubians in Egypt and Sudan. So it would be very different for a Nubian in Egypt, who would be called a slave in the street by Egyptians with a lighter skin who don't consider themselves black, while having a lighter skin in Sudan comes with different cultural issues, and the struggle becomes ethnic. The issue that Nubians refuse to claim being Arabs within Sudan. So that the two struggles are different, because we are implicated and we are stuck in this nation state project, one in Egypt and the other in Sudan. I am Egyptian Nubian, so I am the dark person. I'm the black people of Egypt who has been called a slave before. And the idea of being black, gendered and racialized have always been implicated, and I've always been entangled and interwoven for me in my body, my hair and my black woman curves, and just all these things becoming burdens, or being assumed as burdens for me walking in Egyptian streets. So just to preface, talking about race here, I'm talking about it from a Fanonian sense. Race is something that was imposed on me. I was told that I was black, and this has a certain meaning of devaluing me. And inventing me and inventing a certain identity that I have to either abide to or be punished socially somehow. So as for being racialized in Egypt, even the gender issues that Egyptian women suffer from, with the issue of race, they become exasperated. So, for example, sexual harassment, that is a huge issue and a huge burden on every Egyptian woman's body. A UN commissioned statistic found out that 99.3% of Egyptian women have been racially harassed. But if you are a Black woman in Egypt, your harassment is going to be highly racialized. You're going to be called animalistic. You're always in heat. Black women are more desiring because they are more animalistic, and all these kinds of, it becomes so implicated. My gendering and my racialization becomes so implicated in each other. But also, it comes with a peculiar characteristic of hypersexualizing but defeminizing me. So my race makes me this hypersexual object, but also defeminized because Black is less beautiful and less feminine. And with that comes less power. And for Nubian women specifically, the struggle over our Black body or our African story has been Black and feminist or womanist from the start. The transformation of systems that has taken all that power from Nubian women through series of displacements and in the intervention of Arab culture and then afterwards colonial systems have been dispossessing Nubian women from their powers. So I can't really see these two things away from each other. But I also don't see that I don't think just being a feminist gives you a carte blanche for being anti-racist. Feminist can be a racist, and there is a long history of that. So to be a feminist, a true intersectionalist feminist, we need to have an uncompromising, for feminists to be involved in an anti-racist project, we have to be in a position of uncompromising struggle over justice, and justice for all, and justice altogether. So it has to be anti-racist, anti-classist, anti-ableist, anti-ageist, all the bad things that we are thinking about all together so that we can make a comprehensive project of justice. So for me, when thinking about feminists being there for being an ally, or of course, Black feminists have been preaching about these issues for years. But I think feminists are always at risk of being colonized in white projects, state projects, neoliberal projects. Now they want me to celebrate my body and go buy their stuff. So there are so much risk around just taking the word feminist at face value as if it can on its own fight racism. It has to be conscious and it has to be uncompromising.
Yeah, thanks so much, Menna. So I think there's actually quite a strong parallel in the way that feminism developed in the Middle East, although of course it very much developed in the context of anti-colonial struggles and liberation movements. But you know, the first generations were often sort of middle class, you know, majority, whether, you know, it's Arab in terms of ethnicity, also often in terms of, you know, religion, and not intersectional in terms of paying attention to issues around class, race, sexuality. So I think, you know, even I remember when I did research in the 90s in Egypt, yeah, I mean, class was definitely on the agenda, but race and sexuality clearly were not. And so I think we've definitely seen a shift, and I do find that there is something happening in the new generation. But I'm now going to turn to Khawla to tell us about the Tunisian context. And thank you very much, Menna, for sharing your reflections. Khawla, so Khawla will be speaking in French. So if you want to switch to the English channel on the interpretation button, if you want to listen to the simultaneous interpretation. So Khawla, could you share your insights and experiences in the context of Tunisia? Tunisia, of course, I mean, similar to Egypt, we have had a, you know, revolution, but the issue of racism, anti-Black racism, I think is also something that, you know, has been marginalized for a long time. But how do you experience the Tunisian context?
Merci beaucoup pour l'invitation déjà. En fait, ça fait beaucoup plaisir d'écouter ces interventions et de partager les expériences avec les autres pays arabes. En fait, le contexte tunisien est très compliqué parce que d'un côté, il y a une politique raciste, antiféministe, néolibérale, ancrée depuis des années, et qu'on n'a pas eu la chance en fait de la dépasser. Mais par contre, de l'autre côté, il y a la révolution qui a permis de nous donner une ambiance de démocratie, une ambiance de liberté d'expression. Donc, finalement, on a eu l'espace pour parler de nos problèmes, on a eu l'espace de mettre la question raciale et la question féministe sur la table. Par contre, en fait, la politique nationale et sociale aussi, de l'autre côté, est vraiment très stigmatisante pour les Noirs en général et pour les femmes noires en particulier. En fait, je vais ajouter, Menna et Maie déjà ont bien parlé de ça, mais je vais ajouter qu'en Tunisie, en fait, on a cette xénophobie toute la société considère les Noirs comme des étrangers. Et même quand ils parlent des Noirs, ils disent les Africains, tout en sachant que la Tunisie est bien en Afrique et on est tous des Africains. Et les Africains en Tunisie sont stigmatisés en fait pour plein de trucs, pour être sales, pour ressembler plus à l'animal qu'à l'être humain. Les femmes noires subsahariennes, en fait, elles sont considérées comme des objets sexuels. Elles sont considérées aussi comme des esclaves. En Tunisie, on dit aussi le mot esclave quand on appelle les Noirs dans la rue. Donc d'un côté, on a tout ça, on a cette société qui empêche les Noirs de partir de la marge jusqu'au centre.
Pardon.
Mm-hmm.
Khawla, il y a un problème avec l'interprétation.
Mm-hmm.
Un moment. I understand that people cannot listen to the English interpretation. Am I right that people need to use the English channel, or should they use the French channel? Can someone please help me? Hello. Okay, I hear the interpretation is really hard to hear. Audio not clear. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I think we'll, so yes, you need to use the English channel, and hopefully it will be more clearly audible. Okay, excusez-moi, Khawla.
Do I have to continue?
Okay, yes, you can continue.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay. No problem. En fait, toute cette dynamique sociale et politique n'a pas permis les Noirs d'aller de la marge jusqu'au centre. Il faut penser aussi que les Noirs en Tunisie, ils sont 15% de la population. Par contre, ils sont bloqués dans la marge. On ne les voit pas dans les postes de décision. On ne voit pas des femmes noires qui ont des entreprises. On ne voit pas des femmes noires dans le milieu de la politique. Par contre, de l'autre côté, il y a cette ambiance démocratique et on a pu, après des années, avoir une loi contre la discrimination raciale en Tunisie. Et on a eu une loi pour la protection des femmes aussi en Tunisie. Donc, on a une base juridique très solide. On a des lois qui protègent tout le monde, mais la société est résistante. C'est pour ça que les mouvements féministes n'étaient pas trop supporteurs pour la lutte antiraciste au début parce que, c'était un sujet mal vu. Et on était toujours accusé par vouloir diviser le peuple en deux. On était toujours accusé par être malade, par être hystérique, par être complexé de notre apparence et de notre origine, parce qu'on a demandé de droits. Les gens aussi, et même les décideurs et même les politiciens, ils n'avaient pas fait le lien entre la discrimination que la population noire a connue et entre la dictature. Parce que aussi pendant des années, pendant 50 ans, on a vécu dans la dictature, donc il y a eu des gens bloqués dans la marche, y compris les Noirs. Et donc après la Révolution, quand on a voulu parler de nos droits en tant que Noirs et en tant que personnes marginalisées, on n'a pas eu l'espace parce que toujours le combat des classes est toujours prioritaire. Donc, on a été submergé par la lutte socio-économique. Et do I have to continue or
no, that's fine. Merci beaucoup. And thank you. So I'm really sorry. There has been a problem with the translation. So I'm going to suggest that from now on, we won't have simultaneous interpretation, but we'll ask our interpreter, Jamie, to interpret following, if you speak for a few minutes, and then we'll have the interpretation, but we do it for the next round. Okay.
Okay, but I think that I will try to speak in English. It will be better for everyone.
Do you want to just maybe very quickly try to summarize in English what you said?
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
So all I want to say that we have some movement who are intersectional, but it's new because all our democracy is new and we are starting to have this dynamic in Tunisia. We are starting to learn about how to fight against the domination in all its forms. But I think that the road is way too long for us because we started everything at 2010. So I think we will take our time, we will have more reflection on it, and we will try to improve our fights and to connect our fights either.
Thank you very much. Thank
Welcome.
you. So now I'm not sure, Nabila, is your sound working? Your sound is not working, no. So maybe I'm suggesting that we'll try to get you on the phone. I'll ask Barbara to arrange it with you, and I'll continue with the other questions. And maybe towards the end of the conversation, we'll hear from you, Nabila, on the phone. We'll try to arrange that. I'm so sorry about this technical problem. So I guess I'll go back then to Maie, and I'm interested to know about your personal trajectory in terms of feminist anti-racism, and to, you know, if you're willing to share the main challenges you're facing, but also what are some of the main sources of hope and inspiration for you?
Okay, thank you, Nadia. You guys can hear me still, right? Just thumbs up. Sorry about that. So I would like to start with inspiration and hope, since I'm attending and talking as a feminist and as a part of a radical project toward hope and dreaming of something better. So this is, I'm going to start from, because sometimes we get too caught up in theorizing about everything that's not happening, but there is an amazing and growing movement that is taking place, whether on the context level, regionally and internationally. There is a lot of groups and movement that focuses on the struggle of Black women, migrants, and linkage between queerness and anti-racism. There is a domestic worker movement that is growing extremely strong in Lebanon and in Tunisia, and in other contexts. There is a conversation that is trying to tackle race and racialization and racism that's happening in different countries. The recent one I can recall on top of my head, Tunisia, Lebanon, Egypt, Sudan. And there is more and more voices that we're hearing from Black Palestinian, Black Algerian, Black Lebanese, and Black Egyptian. So this is many points that I have to say that seeing them and seeing the amount of conversation that is happening and representation that is happening, that it's finally done by Black people, whether from each and every country in the context, is amazing. And whether it's social media opening, whether the fact that we're linking with many global conversation, this is happening. Also, the feminist movement have been taking huge step in connecting and driving a project of a global Black feminism. And this is something that I'm extremely appreciative for, by hearing voices not only in the local context regionally, but also voices that would need to be translated somehow. And the effort is being made by many people, whether in Brazil, whether in Mexico, whether in South Africa, like many countries. And I'm just throwing names on top of my head, but we're everywhere. So all of this is giving me hope, because the frustration that we started was 10 years ago, and even before that, it's still present. However, we cannot deny the many effort that is taking place. The fact that we're in this panel today, it's also an amazing, I'm amazed and oh, by everyone. So, and we were fangirling before the panel started, like, I love your work, I love your work. So this is, and I might have dropped many things. I might have forgotten many things that's taken place, because a lot of conversation is bubbling. So I hope to be forgiven for that. Also, the kind of literature that the groups and movement are taking as our own reference and go-to is the literature of Black, feminist, queer women of color. And it's amazing. Audre Lorde, Kimberly Crenshaw, Toni Morrison, Bill Hawkes, those are the names that is being mentioned in our context all the time as a reference and as a guidance and as mentors and spiritual people that we look up to. There is still challenges, however, and the challenges are actually being exposed because of all of the effort that is happening. There's a sense of betrayal toward the movement. Why didn't this happen before? And understanding the history, because you're facing not only many discourses that's telling us that trying to impose the discourse of race, especially in the time of Black Lives Matter, because this is an American issue, and you cannot just export it and work on it in a context where history is different. But no one is pointing to the same thing when we're talking about class, about gender, about many other issues. But if you decided to talk about race, you're being told that, you know, it's not really the same issue because the history is different. The history of the history of racism, the Jim Crow era is different. Everything is different. But at the same time, we do not ask what kind of history that led to the fact that the feminist movement right now in 2021 just started to open the conversation. And it's in infinite steps comparing to other conversation that's happening somewhere else in the world. And we need to ask, we know the names of many amazing feminists that I do hold a lot of my political awareness to them. But if I try to remember which Black feminist do I know who is Arab-speaking African Black feminist, I lose my vision and compass. What name do we know? What name was giving a platform or not? So in this case, I go back to the issue regarding when we talk about the knowledge that is left, examining our history, there's a huge gap, and we're being told history is different, and it's being being told it's only colonization, and there's no effort of examining this. I'm not saying there's no effort, there's lack of effort. We can find access to knowledge about women in MENA and every other intersection, face, class, the revolutions. And I rarely can find resources about women race and MENA, as if we do not have those amazing diversity when it comes to race and ethnicity. And regarding feminist literature, it's considered as one sentence. Like, we work on the intersection of this and this and that, but if we look at queer organizing, race is rarely mentioned. And it's amazing that there is a huge conversation regarding sexuality, and race is not mentioned. This when we look regarding topics regarding sexual reproductive health rights, it's mentioned sometimes and not mentioned other times. It's mentioned as an example, as a tools of analysis, but it's not mentioned like this is what's happening in our context. And there is lumping of what is race. The cases of a Black Egyptian woman, a Black Nubian woman, a Black Sudanese migrant here is not examined separately. So when I talk about, and this is why I talk about the gap between theory and practice, and the fact that every time, sometimes there's a huge blind spot. Every time there is a challenge of walking into a feminist space, whether regionally, internationally, I'm asked to sit in the MENA chair and talk about the MENA issue. And sometimes you look around and you're like, can I be the Black person today? Can I be the African person? Can I be the Arab-speaking African?
Yes.
You cannot be all of those. You're actually allowed to be only one identity at a time. So I'm sorry for making it.
No, thanks so much. I mean, I think linked to that for me, to those debates or lack of debates and lack of sort of historical engagement is also, I mean, I'm still astonished how even quote unquote intersectional feminists in a very unproblematic way use the term Arab, both in the way of not actually recognizing, ethnic diversity within the region, but also the way that Arab does not contain Black often. I mean, there's that, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's that I've been thinking about that quite a bit. But Menna, I'm very interested to hear your experience as well and your trajectory. So the floor is yours.
Well, first I would like to tell Maie this hit so close to home, really, yes, to all what you just said. Well, unlike my colleagues, I'm not lucky enough to be embedded in a activist only or activist mainly primarily context. I am a trained architect, and which is it remains very white and very male. So for me to make it, I have to speak white and I have to behave male. And we all know what that means in our fields to get a job. We know exactly what it means to do that. And the trajectory that I have selected to myself is to not do that anymore. At one moment, somewhere in the past 3 years, I have decided that I will allow my grandmother's voice in my head to usher me through my research and practice. And by my grandmother, I mean that voice that has been always speaking to me when I go to the village and go to my people, but then go back to Cairo and go attend my school and silence that voice. And I know exactly how these kinds of epistemic displacements and epistemic erasures happen. And I would like to refuse this. No more. This voice gets to speak in my head. It gets to usher my practice, and this voice of African womanhood gets to to inform what it means to me for me to be Black, and what it means for me to be an architect and a placemaker, and what do I want to do to change my field. I'm lucky enough to be in a field where so many people want to change it, and there is so much movement towards anti-racist and anti-sexist practices. And I am taking my grandmother's voice into these contexts, and hopefully something will happen. And this perhaps is a partly hope, the part of that is hopeful for me. The challenges, and I would like to again echo everything that Maie said, would be in me trying to find where I am in academic context, for example. I feel very alienated in Middle Eastern studies. I find it very hard to find resources that speaks to the things that I see. I often find more home in concepts like matripotency, Oyomi's matripotency, or other Afro-womanists trying to kind of even challenge what gender is from its Western perspectives. And I find it more within this African context. And there are also other experiences that come with the tangency, the liminality of Nubians within this Arabic-speaking context that I would really like to be able to discuss and have a space to engage with within people who also within this context. But I often feel alienated. I think Middle Eastern studies has so much work to do, and I think this is partly what you're doing, Nadje, now with these conversations that are very important, and that ignite a bit more hope in me that there is a conversation now about race in the Middle East, and you find the conversations, that the issues that I had were just make me question, do we forget that there was slavery in our context? Do we forget that there was issues of racialization that we have imported with colonialism? We forget these things, and we forget how complex they are and how complex they make our life. And I think this is a part of racism, informing knowledge and making it whiter. And I think Middle Eastern studies needs to decolonize now if they want our voices, if they want us to be there on the table and talk together and share these experiences. But all in all, I am hopeful. I am that naive, and I think there's always hope, because we can't afford not having hope.
Yeah, thanks so much, Menna. I agree. And I think actually following particularly last summer's events, I mean, terrible incidents, and the Black Lives Matter movement sort of gaining sort of attention and becoming sort of widespread across the globe. Actually, what I found this year is that lots of Middle East studies sort of contexts started to talk about race and racism. What I'm worried about is that, you know, with so many academic issues, it's a sort of short-lived fad. And I think that's really important, that it's not that, you know, that it's not because, you know, everyone is, you know, wanting to support Black Lives Matter. We are talking now about racism. I mean, that's clearly would be tragic. And I think it's precisely the need to look back historically, as you point out, Menna, but also, you know, look at the present, and very crucially, you know, I'm thinking to what you both said, Maie and Menna, it's also making the connections between academia and activism, and also making the connections, I think, between you know, activists and researchers in the Middle East and North Africa, as well as those like you, Menna, who are in the diaspora. I mean, those connections are also really important. Yeah, thank you both. So I'm going to now move to Khawla. Khawla, will you speak in English or in French?
In fact, I will try to speak in English, but
okay.
if it doesn't work, maybe I will switch to French.
Yes.
In fact, I want to point that the context is so similar in Egypt or in Sudan or wherever. I think we are facing the same problems and the same issues, but small particularities related to the context of each country. When we talk about the feminist anti-racist fight in Tunisia, I think that we are too far of talking about knowledge production or academic research. We are in the point of claiming our right to have our right to justice, and we are also claiming our right to ask for our rights, because in some level we were accused by being crazy. So we want in Tunisia in this level, I think after 2018 we started to feel like we are legitimate and like we have the right to ask for our rights, like all the marginalized group. And after 2020 we started to have some allies, and we started to connect our fights with other movements. So I have hope, of course, but my hope is focused on the fact that we will create this knowledge for others, because we don't have any icons, and Black people, and especially Black women, was invisibilized in the public space, in fact. So even at TV, in Tunisia, you can't see any Black person. In the parliament and all the big positions, we can't see Black people. So now I think we have to concentrate our fight to go from the margin to the center, and to be visible, and to start to create this knowledge. So I think that we are too far in Tunisia, because we are in the step of saying we are here, just give us a look and give us our rights. The main challenge, in fact, that we are facing here, that the law is so developed and the society is so stick to the past and to the practices of racism, of white domination, and we are impressed by the white culture, so that we neglect everything in the other way. So to be respected into right. I think we are hearing you, Nabila. Finally. So, can I continue? Okay. So, the main challenge is that the society is not in the same level with the law. So we have this law, it's so good, it's perfect. We are the first Arabic country that have a law against racism, but the judges are racist, the police officers are racist, the lawyers are racist, so no one can make it possible to apply this law. And we are trying to erase the slavery from our culture. And for a while, I forgot, or I didn't have the idea that there is slavery in Tunisia. We was always concentrated on the fact that we were colonized, and I think there is a huge political effort to erase all the history related to the slavery in Tunisia. So I think it's a big challenge for us, because we have to admit the history and the past so we can change the future. So if we want to make like, because Black people in Tunisia are suffering from the consequences of the slavery. So we have to admit that, and we have to make politics to go in counter of what was made in the past. When we want to talk about inspiration, as Maie and Menna said, I think the only Arabic source of inspiration that I have is Nawal Saadawi. But we are impressed by Bell Hooks, by Angela Davis, by Audre Lorde. We have many references from the other part of the world. It is useful, it is inspiring, but it's not, but it doesn't stick to our daily life and to our context and to our experience. So, as I said, my only hope that we are going to change the future. And I'm sorry for my English. I hope that you understood me.
No,
and thank
your
you
English,
so much.
English is excellent, Khawla. And I think most of the audience would be extremely delighted if they could speak French like you speak English. But I mean, we could really, really understand you extremely well. So thanks a lot. I think it's really an interesting point, and I hadn't thought about it this way, but the way that actually anti-colonial struggle in some ways kind of ended up covering up, or kind of sort of focusing all the attention, and in some ways not allowing to engage. Well, it's not that's not allowing, but in some ways, it kind of marginalized actually the history of slavery. And of course, it was colonialism, but more recently the struggle against authoritarian regimes. And so, yeah, I really appreciate your intervention. So now we are hoping that we can connect with Nabila via the phone. So bear with us. This is, really just us improvising. So hopefully Nabila will be talking via phone, and Jamie, our interpreter, will interpret. We'll see if it works through the English channel. If not, what I'll ask Nabila to do is to just speak for a couple of minutes, and then we'll ask Jamie to interpret following that. So let's try first if it works via the channel. So those of you who need French to English interpretation, if you move to the English channel, if the quality is as bad as it was before, then we'll try something else. So let's just work it out. So Nabila, I'm so yeah, hello. So I mean, just we've asked these two questions. I guess I'm interested to hear from you in terms of both your personal trajectory, the main challenges you're facing in the context that you're working in. So this is Algeria, right? Sorry.
Donc, je suis d'abord enseignante-chercheur. Je travaille essentiellement sur les questions migratoires en Algérie, en transit et de passage en Algérie.
Sorry, excuse me. Sorry, so I'm on the English channel and I hardly hear anything, which means that our audience is not hearing anything either. So can I suggest? Oh, Nabila, yes. Okay, so let's. Okay. Shall we try not simultaneous but sequential interpretation? Shall we try that? Jamie? Okay, yes. Shall we try sequential interpretation so that she'll speak for a couple of minutes and then you interpret it? I think that will be probably better. Yeah, it was very bad. Okay. Okay, so Nabila, just 1 or 2 minutes and then we'll have the translation. Okay.
Alors, je peux commencer? Alors,
voilà, moi, je suis
enseignante-chercheur. Je travaille essentiellement sur les vers l'Algérie. Et j'avais travaillé d'abord avec des migrants algériens et tout ça, mais aujourd'hui, je travaille avec
de l'actualité mondiale, de l'actualité maghrébine et africaine. Et c'est dans ce contexte-là que j'ai rencontré justement des activistes féministes.
Nabila?
Oui.
Sorry. Jamie, could you translate? Did you hear what Nabila said? You didn't hear anything. Pardon, Nabila, mais c'est tellement difficile de vous entendre. Je suis tellement désolée, mais ça ne marche pas.
Mais bon.
I mean, if you speak like this, we can actually hear you better. Try again.
Okay.
Yes.
Donc voilà, je me représente. Moi, je travaille essentiellement sur les mouvements migratoires en Algérie. Donc, plusieurs passages, y compris le passage subsaharien dans cette région qui est actuellement mon sujet de recherche. Et c'est dans ce contexte-là, justement, que j'ai été confrontée à cette question du racisme. Cette question de lutte, justement, et cette xénophobie d'abord, très présente dans le paysage algérien, dans la société algérienne, du sommet jusqu'à la population qui côtoie au quotidien ces subsahariens et ces migrants. Et en même temps, cette présence qui était d'abord inattendue en Algérie, parce que c'est un pays qui n'était pas préparé à devenir un pays d'installation ou un pays de transit. Non, ça passe pas.
Pardon, Nabila, mais c'est vraiment difficile de vous entendre. Je suis tellement désolée.
Mais je peux vous envoyer après mes réponses par, je sais pas, par mail ou un truc comme ça, parce que c'est le plus simple maintenant. Je n'arrive pas à vous avoir.
Oh oui, oui.
D'accord. Je vais vous faire un mail tout de suite.
OK.
Merci. Merci.
D'accord. Merci beaucoup et je suis tellement désolée, Nabila.
Moi aussi, hein, Merci.
OK, now, ça marche maintenant. Alors, essayez encore une fois.
Oui, vous m'entendez là?
Oui, c'est mieux.
D'accord. Donc là, je suis passée du téléphone à l'audio direct sur mon ordinateur. Donc,
oui, c'est mieux, tellement mieux.
D'accord. Voilà, donc je vous disais que moi, je travaillais essentiellement avec une population subsaharienne pour le moment qui est de passage en Algérie dans le but d'une migration de transit ou d'installation, parce que vu le contexte mondial, vu le contexte africain aujourd'hui, il y a plus d'installations en Algérie que de passage. Et c'est dans ce contexte-là que j'ai été confrontée à cette question de racisme. Bon, la question de racisme en Algérie comme en Tunisie et comme dans tout le Maghreb, c'est une question qui existe et qui existait depuis toujours, mais elle était tue. On était un petit peu dans le déni. Il faut compter que l'Algérie, comme la Tunisie, compte beaucoup de Noirs qui sont originaires du sud du pays. Et il faut savoir que plus de 50% de la superficie de l'Algérie représente justement ce sud, ce désert, où la population est essentiellement noire. D'où mon origine aussi. Je suis originaire du sud de l'Algérie. Mais ce sud, il a toujours été marginalisé. C'est comme les zones un petit peu frontalières. C'est des zones qui sont toujours dans la marge. Mais paradoxalement, en Algérie, c'est cette marge qui est elle est la plus productive parce que l'économie algérienne repose essentiellement sur oui. Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Oui, comme ci, comme ça, mais c'est difficile d'entendre l'interpréteur. Alors, je pense que peut-être c'est mieux Jamie, I think it's better if you interpret directly and not via the channel, because I can't hear you very well. Ok. Ok. Est-ce que vous pouvez parler un peu plus lentement?
Oui, bien sûr. Bien sûr.
Oui. Oui.
Donc, la question du racisme en Algérie, c'est pas une question qui est nouvelle ou qui est apparue, parce que l'Algérie elle-même compte une population noire, mais il y a une distinction au sein de cette même population qui est marginalisée dans son propre pays. Le passage et l'arrivée des subsahariens en Algérie n'a fait qu'exacerber justement cette xénophobie envers l'autre, envers le noir. Par exemple, moi, étant chercheur, je fais mes enquêtes avec des subsahariens en Algérie et je suis souvent confrontée à la question, est-ce que ça va?
Pardon. Can anyone else, can you hear the translation, the interpretation? Okay.
Est-ce que je peux vous envoyer un mail avec la réponse comme ça?
Oui, oui,
d'accord.
Oui.
Donc, je vais faire ça, je vais me déconnecter et vous envoyer le mail, ça sera mieux.
Oui, oui, ça sera mieux. Et tellement,
je suis
merci
vraiment frustrée,
beaucoup, Nabila, et je suis tellement désolée.
Ouais, pas de souci, donc je vous l'envoie tout de suite. Je vous rejoins par mail.
Merci.
Merci à vous.
Yeah, I'm terribly sorry for Nabila and to all of you as well. I'm now going to turn to the questions. Okay, so the first question is in French for Khawla. It's from my colleague and friend Zahra Ali. Hello, Zahra. Lovely that can join us.
I have to read the question because I didn't see it. So she's asking me if there is a connection between anti-racist movement in Tunisia and the other country, les francophones. I didn't find the word in English. So in fact, the question is so pertinent because we are launching our movement. So we are starting the reflection. We are starting to speak about our problem, even among us, because we didn't have the right to speak before. So I think that we didn't arrive to the level to have connection with the Francophone movement, but we have a small connections between us and the other Maghrebian countries, Algeria, Morocco, Libya. We started to have connection. We started to empower each other in the advocacy campaigns. So when it comes to claiming their rights, or when it comes to have a campaign, to awareness raising campaign or so on, we are connected to other movements in other Maghrebian countries. I think that we have to start to think seriously about having a bigger connections and to share our experience with other movements all over the world, because I think that we can learn some good practices, and we can either know more about the history and the experience of other Black women over the world. So, but we still have time, in fact, because it's so recent, and we are starting to collect our energy and our power and our reflection, and to create our specificity, because we still don't have a political identity for our struggle. So I think it's better that we take our time to just make our identity, and then we can open ourselves to other fights and we can collaborate with other. But in this context, I think it's so early to go on that kind of collaborations.
Yeah, thank you very much, Khawla. Elaine Abirad is suggesting to have Jamie on the panel, which I think is a great idea. So we'll try, we're working on that so that we, can actually listen to Nabila. Okay, meanwhile, I'm going to share a few other questions. So one also from Zahra Ali to everyone. Do you see a relationship between anti-racist activism and language? Arabic limiting the conversation and English, French allowing the conversation between activists, or not at all? A question by Douglas Williams. How do we make this a consistent conversation, anti-Blackness in the MENA community? Yeah, good question. Zainab Abbas, a question specifically addressed to Maie. Maie, do you think for our struggle, race has to be the dominant part of our struggle? Even in my youth, Black women were asked to theorize about wages for housework, which bore no relation to our reality as Black women. Okay, so who'd like to start? Maie, would you like to start?
Yes, I can start with the last question and then I can give space to everyone. So do I think race need to be, okay, can you just say the question one more time? I don't want to answer something else. Nadje, I think you're muted, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Do you think for our people, race has to be the dominant part of our struggle? Even in my youth, Black women were asked to theorize about wages for housework, which bore no relation to our reality as Black women.
Okay, this is an extremely important question, and I keep asking myself this all the time. I do not want to be the person in the room always reminding people, like, can we mention race, just talk about it, talk about the... However, I was taught within the feminist movement to be occupied and question the rooms we find ourselves in. So if we're questioning the room and we find that the room is mostly people who define as Arab, we find the room speaking Arabic or English or French, we find the room leaning more towards academic or linguistic, that only accessible, or a language that can be only accessible through a certain education or certain class, then we need to ask ourselves, and then we look around in the room and we find one or two, maybe if we're lucky, Black people who their only solely job is to explain and re-explain the experience that they're going through, for the rest to understand, for the rest to mobilize, for the rest to make an action. But you're not part of the action, you're just a translator of your experience. And sometimes you take on your shoulder the translator, the effort of experiencing, because sometimes I find myself experiencing the experience of Black Nubian women, because everyone is looking at me and I'm like, I'm Sudanese living in Egypt, which is kind of, I'm not Nubian. And sometimes you explain the experience of migrant women, domestic worker, Sudanese woman, and Egyptian women. So you have a lot on your shoulder and you're occupied explaining and re-explaining to the room, what does it mean to be that Black person in this context? And sometimes we feel like such an imposter, because I do not want to take the space of the Nubian women to talk about their own experience. And by investigating the rooms we find ourselves in for 10 years and more, yes, I do believe that our people need to think of our relationship to race. And I read this line one day. I cannot quote it by heart. I'm not one of those people, but I will try to remember. It was written in the bridge called My Back. And it was mainly saying, we are the Black women, we are the ones who are taking care of your children, so you can go to the feminist meeting and talk about our liberation. And I do remind myself of this all the time. Who is left behind? Who is taking care? Who's doing what kind of division of labor is happening? the situation of domestic workers, and we keep inviting. I found this happening in a lot of rooms that, yes, it's invited to Black women, but they never show up. And no one is asking themselves what kind of time and space and position and location you're choosing for Black women to be able to show up. Are they taking care of your children somewhere else? Are they taking care of their own children? Are they doing a labor of domestic work or working 12 hours? Are they able to speak Arabic? Are they able to speak French? If they found themselves in this activist space, will they be able, or will we be able? I do not want to other someone while speaking. Will we be able to pick up on the conversation, or are we going to be just sitting silent, trying to catch up? So there's so many elements that by investigating them, we're investigating a bigger question regarding class, regarding positionality, and race is a lens to look at this. Yes, wages for housework is important. I love it. it's part of the, but when I talk about it, sometimes I check all the papers I read. Is Bill Hooks cited as much as in this paper that Sylvia Beatrice, I love them both, I look up to them. Is Angela Davis cited? Are we citing any African feminist? Are we citing only the Black American women who are theorists and cultural influence, or are we citing African feminists? And this is questions we need to ask, and if race is going to help us shed a light at this, also it's important. And also we have to admit the tension in our movement. There is a tension between Black Egyptian and migrants and Black Sudanese, and this is a question that is going to hit very close to home. It's a conversation of betrayal. It's a conversation of heartbreak, and I was in awe of the young, amazing Sudanese activist immediately last year, having those conversations with an older generation. And when we're saying older generation, we're talking our families, our family member, our parents who are investigating everything that we were brought up to believe about our Arabness, and how does it make us superior for the Black, and why was one Sudan became two? And those are questions that is in the heart of everyday life. And why when I walk into the room, I'm always welcome as a Black person, but I never see other Black people. Why? Why has this been a situation? And just to be also fair, I want to give a huge credit to Fatma Imam, an amazing Egyptian activist, Nubian, who've been investigating with a question of race and race for the past 10 years and still happening. And I learned so much from her. But walking to the feminist room was never helpful to make you understand your relationship to other Black women and other ethnicities. You're always too busy explaining yourself, and you're receiving too much guilt complex that we're too busy dealing with that to organize with each other. So we're busy dealing with the guilt complex than to reach out to an amazing groups that have been working in Lebanon and Tunisia and Algeria, all over the world, with the language barrier, with everything, and say, okay, sisters, let's work together. Let's do this. Okay. So yeah. Sorry.
Great, thank you, Maie. So I'm going to try one more thing. Bear with me. Nabila, can you try one more time to speak, because we now have Jamie, the interpreter, actually joining us directly, so he would be able to talk. So can you try again? And I'm so sorry that I'm doing this to you, but
ouais.
Yeah.
Donc voilà, je reprends du début. Je vais parler lentement pour que je puisse être comprise et entendue surtout par le traducteur. Donc voilà, moi je vous disais que j'étais chercheur. Je travaillais essentiellement sur les mouvements migratoires en Algérie, le passage de l'Algérie et vers l'Algérie. Dans le terrain actuel, je suis en train de préparer une recherche autour des subsahariens justement présents sur le sol algérien, le territoire algérien. Et c'est de là que la...
Okay, sorry. Jamie, can you please translate for our audience? Jamie? Hello?
Oh, I had never muted myself. Somehow I got muted. There we go.
Okay.
All right. So let me just re-summarize what she had just said, if I may. She had said that she had begun her initial researching the Algerian experience and Algerian migration. She is now concentrating our focus on. Nabila, vous pouvez continuer maintenant. Si vous pouvez me donner quelques instants après avoir parlé pour que je puisse traduire.
Très bien, d'accord, ça marche. Donc voilà. Donc, et justement, en parlant de ce passage des subsahariens vers l'Algérie et le passage par le sud, le désert, il faut
We talk
noter
about the passage from the sub-Saharan to the south.
Que l'Algérie compte plus de 60% de sa superficie comme une zone désertique, du désert. On a la Sahara, on a le Gourara et ces subsahariens.
Algeria's surface is more than 70% occupied by African American individuals. And so, I'm sorry, Black individuals, yes.
Et ces subsahariens, pour arriver justement au nord de l'Algérie où leur projet commence justement, parce que
the project is starting just in the north of what is called sub-Saharan.
Que ce qui les importe, c'est la traversée justement de cette Méditerranée pour rejoindre les côtes européennes. Ils sont obligés de faire faire cette traversée par étapes. Et cette traversée commence justement au sud, dans des villes comme Tamanrasset, Adrar, Béchar, etc.
Nadje, I'm so sorry. I'm still only getting portions of what she's saying. I'm getting a dropout for some reason. I'm so sorry. I can't get everything.
Okay. Pardon, Nabila. Il y a des problèmes. Il y a toujours des problèmes.
Mais je viens de vous envoyer un mail.
D'accord.
Voilà.
OK, thank you.
On va faire comme ça. Je continue mon mail.
OK, merci. Khawla, would you like to address the question that was posed about language? And then I'll ask Menna to also.
Puis je vais demander à Menna.
Okay, I think you need to now. I think it's okay. You don't need to translate now, JB. I think it's okay.
So, a relationship between anti-racist activism and language. I think that yes, Arabic is limiting the conversation, since all the big anti-racist movement are English speaking. So even for researches, even for articles or studies or so on, I think we have to have the privilege of speaking English or speaking French. And as a marginalized group and as a group who is not implicated in the dynamic, in the social dynamic in Tunisia, it's not so common to have Black people who speaks English or French. So I think you have to have the minimum of the privilege to open the conversation about racism in the with other activists, and to have a look on other contexts and other struggles. So you have to have this privilege. I think even the terms that we are using in our fights, we don't have an equivalent in Arabic. For example, we don't have the word queer in Arabic. We don't have the equivalent in our language. So if you want to speak about the queer feminist anti-racist struggle, we have to use words from other language. So I think it's related to all the other aspects of our fight, is that we have to create our words and we have to create a new language to talk about our issues and our experience. And I think that we also have to move on with Arabic and adapt it to the context, to the global context, and to break this barrier that we are having right now. So thank you.
Thank you. And I guess sort of there's also an issue in terms of course, Arabic and the different Arabic dialects. And I mean, there's definitely sort of an issue in terms of North Africa and the Middle East. And I know that both in Egypt and also in Lebanon, I mean, I think groups like Ikhtiyar, but also Kuhl have been trying to work on language, on, you know, Arabic. And I'm sure there are similar initiatives in North Africa. I mean, one of the things that I find that is also sort of an issue is the kind of not so much communication between feminist and anti-racist activists in the Middle East and North Africa. There seems to be a divide. And sometimes also, you know, language seems to be a problem there. Menna, would you like to respond to Zahra's question?
Yes, I would like to, first of all, disagree slightly with my colleagues, although I agree we end up speaking several languages, and there's so much work for translators to do, bridging these gaps for us, and we need them, and we need a queer, feminist, and anti-racist language in the languages that we use. I think we are all running away from Arabic because Arabic is dominated and hegemonized by state power. We're afraid to say so many things in Arabic and get locked up in some cases in some countries. So we end up in English and French because of colonial histories, that English and French became the languages with these resources, that we end up speaking English in some parts and French in other parts. But I would also like to exploit this opportunity, this question, to raise the issue of actually Black languages. We speak Nubian as well. We speak other indigenous languages within the Middle East. These languages have been hiding and fostering and supporting the struggle against racism and against the dehumanization of Black people and brown people within the context of North Africa, especially. Our struggle, for me especially, our Nubian struggle have always been hidden in language. Arabic has been containing all these state-friendly notions, but in Nubian, you hear the pain and you hear the anti-dam, anti-state, anti-hegemony narratives. So I think there is a blind spot also behind these languages. And I still think translators have a huge role to play here. And supporting these languages and the erasure of these languages have been a part of state projects across the MENA region. And I think that supporting these languages and supporting literature and supporting product coming out of these Black languages is essential for within a project of supporting Black struggle in the Middle East.
Yeah, thank you very much. Maie, I was wondering, did you want to come in terms of, or any of you, in terms of the connections across different countries and regions? I mean, you know, I'm interested in the networks, and I'm sort of conscious of time. We just have 5 minutes, but would anyone like to offer some thoughts on that? And I would also like to say that what we're going to do is we're going to ask Nabila to send the email, and we'll make a translation of her email and her reply available on our website alongside a recording of this event. Okay. Yeah, Maie, did you want to come in? And very quickly, because we literally have 4 minutes. And
sure.
Yeah.
Regarding the connection, we need to also acknowledge the systems and the mechanism that might make those connections stronger. It's not just the willingness of a different activist group in different contexts to reach out to each other. It is the willingness of the funding mechanism of allowing this to happen and putting it as a priority for a group in Egypt to reach out to a group in Tunisia, of creating a network that require time, space, and most importantly, money. And we cannot disregard this when we're talking about the conversation, because again, it goes back to individual willingness if you want to do this or not. Having, as we did establish a meeting with Black activist and anti-racist feminist movement will have the question of how many dialect and language we allow in, which is again a question of funding, of how many interpretation would happen, so no one would be left out of the conversation. I did like a clear example of now, Nabila, I'm losing so many things because it's very hard for me to speak French. But again, when we think of this on a global level, yes, we do have an issue of language reaching out to each other, and having an English or Arabic only is not going to be a solution. So this need to happen, but again, Black women and Black people and Black movement and anti-racist movement in the region and in the context need to be funded and need to be supported academically in order for this to happen. It's a collective effort, not only from within, not only from we want it to happen, but we need to have the resources for this to happen. And how we're perceived in Middle Eastern studies also need to be investigated and re-investigated, not only as a subject, but as a writer of our own narrative, whether in different languages and different dialects. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, I think that long sort of noticed that often resources and money is available to make connections between, you know, feminist activists and organizations based in the global South with, you know, feminists in the global North. I mean, whether it's the US or Europe, but very limited resources are available to actually bring people together. And it seems to me that, you know, that is so important on different on different levels. But yeah, I mean, language is definitely something that is an issue, but I guess we all need to do better to overcome it by either, you know, learning more languages or, you know, trying to make sure next time we have a meeting that we work on interpretation in a better way, because I don't think it should stop us. I think if there is a will and there should be a strong political will, and there's also an economic rationale to talk to each other. I'm really, really sorry. We have to stop at this point. I mean, I'm particularly, of course, sorry, Nabila, that we were not able to listen to you, but I will make sure that we will translate your reply and that we'll post it on our website alongside a recording of the event. I'd like to thank all of you, Khawla, Menna, Maie, and Nabila for joining us. I'd like to thank the audience for joining us and for putting the questions. And clearly, you know, this is not an end. This is a part of a growing conversation that's happening in different contexts. Yes, I'm hoping to continue facilitating and be part of this conversation. Thank you, everyone.